So we're doing PARSHA Beshalach and 366, if you have the same book as me. And it begins, Vayi Beshalach Paro es ha'am, and when Pharaoh sent out the people, V'lo nachem Elokim derech eretz Plishtim ki karavu. God did not send them by way of the land of Plishtim because it was close. Ki amar Elokim pen yinachem am barosam milcham l'shuv Misraima. Because what will happen is that the nation will see how strong the Philistines are, and because of it, they'll get afraid and they'll go back to Egypt. And then, right, then he didn't want that. But some of the commentaries say that it's a bit different than that. First, it says that what does it mean ki karavu? Because it's close, right? The land of the Plishtim was close. You'd say God wanted to send the Jewish people to Israel. He should send them the fastest way. Fastest way would go through the land of the Philistines, the Plishtim. And excuse me, it says he didn't do that because he felt that as soon as they would get to their land, the Plishtim would put up a battle, and the Hebrews would get afraid, and they'd say, no, we're not going to do this. We're going back to Egypt. Right? So he said then he didn't do it. But the commentaries tell us that really there's a deeper meaning. Another meaning is that God did not send them by way of the land of the Philistines. Ki karavhu. Ki karavhu also means because he's related to them. A karov is a relative, someone who's close. That's what karov means. Karuvim. Those who are close are your family. So it's answering a very important philosophic question. Right? The way it answers it here is you can imagine if you're one of the Jews and you're leaving Egypt, and you want to get out of there, you want to get on with it. You want to get to Israel already. So how do you go? You go the fastest way. And what does God do? He sends them the hardest way. He sends them the longest way. He doesn't send them the fastest way, and he sends them where they're going to go to the Dead Sea. They're going to go in the desert. It's not going to be as easy. So they're complaining. What does God got to make it so hard for us for? We've been already, excuse me, we've been slaves for over 200 years. It's time for God, right, to take us out and get us to Israel already. Why do we got to go the long way? It's just like we do. We have our lives, and God makes somebody sick. God makes sure that we don't make a living sometimes. God makes things hard. And we say, what's he doing this for me for? Why, right? We always ask, why does God do these things? And so here they're saying, why is God doing this? Why is God sending us the hard way? Send us the easy way.
But did they know there was another easy way? That there was
Yeah, they knew that they were going out of their way. They weren't going the right direction. So he says here, the answer is because he's related to them. That is to say that, sometimes a parent, in order to teach a child something, will do something the child doesn't understand. Right? A child is going to stick his finger in a light socket or put his hand on a hot stove, and so what do? You hit him. So the kid doesn't understand that he's going to get hurt by putting his finger in the light socket. So he's wondering, what did he hit me for? What did he do? What do you don't like me now? You suddenly have to hit me, right? So they don't realize that you just saved them from a lot of pain because you're close to them, because you're your mother, the father. Right? You don't want your child to get hurt, so you're prepared to give them a little bit of pain in order to stop them from having serious pain. And even if you don't hit them, so that you yell at them, you somehow get them not to do it. Right? Why? Ki karavu. Because you're related. And that's the answer to the philosophic question. Why does God make things hard for us? Sometimes it seems that he goes out of his way. Right? He tells us you have to go to shul on Yom Kippur and you have to fast. And then Erev Yom Kippur, you get the flu. And you're sick. And now you're going to fast with the flu? It has to be that. It's not bad enough I have to fast. I have to pray in shul. Like, let's say, imagine me. I have to pray in shul. I have to fast. I have to speak 5 times. I have to greet all kinds of people. And I got a flu on top of it. He has to do that. Can't he wait a week and give me the flu later? He has to give me the flu now? What's wrong with it? What's he punishing me for? See, the answer is he's related to me. In other words, he's like a parent. And sometimes a parent does something that a child doesn't understand, but ultimately you need to know that whatever that parent does is doing for your best. So too with God. So God takes us the long way, but he's doing it for our best. Because what would happen if we went the short way? We would have gotten afraid. We would have gone to war. We wouldn't have been prepared. And we would end up going back and being slaves again. God understood that's what would happen. So therefore, he puts us a little bit out of our way so that we shouldn't have that happen. So that answers a very important a fundamental point. And of course, this is right at the creation of the Jewish people. They're just, they're still in their formative stages. They're young. The Jewish people are not a month old. Right? In fact, they're not even a week old. And right, they're really young. And so God is telling us right now, the beginning of the Jewish nation, one of the first things you need to know is you're not going to know everything. You're not going to understand everything. You're going to think sometimes that I'm doing something that's harmful, but I never do anything that's harmful for you. I'm your parent. I love you. And even if it appears that way, I want you to know that that's the case. So one of the first things he teaches us is that right there. And then it goes on. So therefore God sends them by way of the desert, by the sea. Now this is a funny line, this end of it. It says, with chamushim, the Jewish people came out of the land of Egypt. What are chamushim? So the simple translation is that it's weapons, weaponry. That the Jewish people took with them weapons so that if they do get attacked, they can fight back. Chamushim would be another name for weapons. They had, M16s and Kalashnikov machine guns. Whatever it was that they had with them, they had them. But the commentaries tell us that that's too simple an understanding. Many of them say that chamushim is the same word as chumashim, which means 5 books. Now, they didn't have the Torah yet, but it means that they already had been given some of the information of the Torah, and they came with the merit of the Torah. So that when they left Egypt, they left as the Hebrew. They were still becoming the Jewish people. You understand that the Jewish people at this point were not Jewish. You're not Jewish until we got the Torah. They were Hebrews. Hebrew is a nationality, right? A nation. The people, they're part of the Hebrew nation, just like you could be part of America or the Canadian people. But it's not a race. It's not a religion. It's not a way of life. It's simply a country you live in. So they were Hebrews. Now they're becoming Jews because the Torah is about to be given. So here it's starting to tell us that the fact that they're becoming Jews is starting right now. It's as if they carried with them the Torah. That's how it says it. Vayikach Moshe es SHMOS Yosef imo. And here's a very important statement. What did Moshe take with him? He took the bones of Yosef. Why? Because if you remember, a couple weeks ago, Yosef makes the Jewish people, or the Hebrews, promise that when they leave the land of Egypt, that they're going to take his bones with them. Right? You're not going to leave my body behind. So it says that Moshe did that. Now here it says that the commentaries tell us, and the Medrash tells us that this showed the wisdom of Moshe. That everyone else took with them all of the things that the Egyptians gave them. If you remember, last week's PARSHA talked about how the Egyptians gave gold and silver and all types of items to the Jewish people when they're about to leave. They were going to give them livestock, all kinds of things. Right? It said that it said that God made the Egyptians fine. It says chain, nice. That the Jewish people were nice, and that the Egyptians wanted to give them things. So they gave them all their wealth, because it says the Jewish people would leave with wealth. When Moshe's idea of wealth was the mitzvah of taking Yosef's body. And Moshe was a wealthy man, but it wasn't that he could have filled his pockets with jewels. Right? They say that, and to understand this, the number of the commentaries tell a story. And the story is about a fellow who's very, very poor. Very poor. And let's say he's living somewhere in Europe, and near a coast. And he's told that that there's an island far, far away, like let's say the South Pacific. And in that island, it says, they have so many diamonds that they're just laying in the sand. And if you go to that island and you collect the diamonds and come back, you'll be a rich person. So he says, well, I got to do this for my family. So he basically starves himself for the next 6 months to save his money to buy a ticket to go. Because you can only go once a year, and you can only come back once a year, because it's so far away. So he saves up all his money, he buys a ticket, and off he goes. So as he's going, he gets to this island, and he sees diamonds are laying in the sand. Everywhere is diamonds. So he says, oh, I made it. He starts filling his pockets with diamonds. Then he realizes, you know what? I've been here already a day. I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat something. So he goes in, he finds the city. He goes in the city, and he orders a meal. And they say, okay, It's going to cost you X amount. And he says, no problem. Here, take a diamond. I got all these diamonds. Just take one. It's got to be worth more than the meal. And they said, what are you giving us? Diamonds are on the street. Diamonds are worth nothing. Right? On this island, you can't. Diamonds have no worth. You just go down to under the seashore and you can collect them. On this island, you know what has money? What's worth money? Animal fat. Because they don't have a lot of animals on the island. And animal fat is used for cooking, it's used for heating, it's used for all kinds of purposes. That is our commodity that we use for money. So if you want a meal, you have to pay us 260 grams of animal fat. Well, of course, he doesn't have any animal fat. Where's he going to get animal fat? He just landed from a boat, collecting diamonds all day. He's got a whole bag full of diamonds. So he doesn't know what to do. So he goes out and he starts doing business, like working and doing business with the local people, and he starts to acquire animal fat. And he buys food, and he has a house. He's got to be there for a whole year anyways, till the boat comes back. So what happens is that he's very successful, and over the period of the year, he becomes like a major philanthropist in animal fat. He's like one of the richest guys on the island. Right? So he's got all this animal fat. He's got bags and bags and bags of animal fat. And he's buying and selling stuff. Now the boat comes. So he says, okay, it's time to go back. Takes his animal fat, puts it on the boat, and goes. Right? Well, as he's going, of course, the boat, being not modern times, doesn't have refrigeration. The animal fat's sitting in the sun, spoils, and the whole boat stinks. Right? Nevertheless, it's his animal fat. They take whatever amount of months or weeks to get back to where he lived in Europe. And he gets there and he realizes all of his animal fat spoiled. And he goes and he sees his wife. And he tells his wife, I'm so rich now. You can't believe it. I brought back a whole ton of animal fat. I went over there and I got all animal fat. And his wife says, animal fat? What are we supposed to do with animal fat? It's not only that we don't need it, it stinks. It's spoiled. What animal fat? And he suddenly hits him that he blew it. He had to bring back diamonds, not animal fat. Animal fat's only good on the island. Everywhere else in the world you need diamonds. So he realized that he had given up a year of his life, all of his money. He was starving himself before he left. His family had nothing for an entire year, so he could go get the diamonds. He comes back and he doesn't have any diamonds. All he has is this spoiled animal fat, and he faints. A couple of days later, he comes to in the hospital, and everybody's happy. So what are you so happy about? They said, well, you did. It's true. You didn't bring back a lot of diamonds. You brought back this animal fat, which is wasting money. Nobody needs it. It's spoiled. But when we tried to get rid of it at the hospital, we went through your pockets. We found one diamond that was in your pockets. And that diamond gave us enough money to support us for 10 years. So we're fine. Right? So that's the end of the story. So what's the lesson? The lesson is you have to know what it is that has a worth. In this world, money is worth things. Right? Money gives you power. Money gives you all types of things. You can look good. You can feel good. Money does whatever you need in this world. But in the next world, money has no worth. The next world is only mitzvahs. Right? They say that the only check that you can take with you in the world to come is a canceled check that's made out to tzedakah, to charity. Right? That you used it. You gave it to the charity and it's canceled. Right? They paid it. They got their money. That you can take with you. Why? Because it's not the money you're taking with you. It's the reward for the mitzvah. Right? So here this guy, it's like this guy was a soul and he was up in heaven. And he comes down to earth and he sees that this family is, right, they need diamonds. Right? And he ends up with the fat. The idea being is that he got confused. So too we go running around here in this story, excuse me, all the Jews go running after the gold and silver that the Egyptians give him. What does Moshe take? He takes the mitzvah. He takes that mitzvah of Yosef's bones with him. That's what was important. Right? A smart person realizes the true worth of a mitzvah versus the true worth of money. While everybody else is running around for money, Moshe takes the bones with him to teach you the importance of that. So then it says that they started to travel, and at the top of the next page, Hashem tells Moshe, tell the children of Israel that they shouldn't turn back. Right? And Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are imprisoned in the land. The wilderness has locked them in. I shall strengthen the heart of Pharaoh, and he will pursue them. Right? And it goes on and it says, it was told to the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants became transformed regarding the people, and they said, what is this that we have done, that we have sent away Israel from serving us? Now, any person with a brain knows that that's not true. It sounds like some of the crazy things that once in a while that you hear in the name of the president, right? Like this craziness. When Pharaoh sent out the Jewish people, God made him send out the Jewish people. Pharaoh didn't choose to send away the Jewish people. They were sent out because God destroyed their economy, destroyed their country, finally killed their children. So they realized that they better send out the people. So what does he say? What is this that we've done? We sent away the Jewish people from serving us? Right? As if he thinks he did it himself. Right? This is a common thing. Right? In the reality of the situation, he might realize now that God is forcing him to do it, and he better do it. Right? But in his mind, he's all-powerful. And he doesn't remember that anymore, that what God did. In his mind, he's the one who did it. And therefore, he says such a thing. And this is a common problem of that we learn lessons in our lives. And we have a thing called cognitive dissonance, which is the ability to know something, but to not really know it. Like a guy who smokes. He knows that smoking will give you cancer, right? But he'll smoke anyways. It won't give me cancer. But 8 out of 10, let's say, make it up, 8 out of 10 people get cancer. Like, who's to say you won't be the 2? Maybe you'll be part of the 8. Chances are you're part of the 8, not part of the 2 that don't get it. I'm not going to get it. That happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. I'm not going to get it. So he'll keep smoking, right? The guy who drives drunk, same thing. He knows he shouldn't drive drunk. He knows that drinking is going to affect his ability to see the outside world. That's why you drink. You drink so you don't feel whatever it is that you don't want to feel, or that you feel good, right? So of course you can't drive. But he thinks, of course, the average person can't drive, but I can drive. It's not so hard for me. I can do it. Right? That's cognitive dissonance, it's called. The ability to know a fact but not allow it to change you. Right? That's the idea here, is that Pharaoh knows that God forced him to do it. But he can't accept that. He can't accept that the great Pharaoh was knocked down by God. Pharaoh believed he was God. And he ultimately couldn't accept it. So he says, what is this that we've done? We sent away the Hebrews. Right? He didn't send away anybody. God did it. But that's how he sees it. So what does he do? Now he runs after them. So it goes through this whole description of Pharaoh going after them with all of his men, his whole army, right? And what is this that you've done to take us out of Egypt? The Jewish people say to Moshe, like, what's going on here? Were there no graves in Egypt that we have to come out here? They're looking, they see Pharaoh's coming with the army. He's going to kill them all. They're standing on the edge of an ocean, right, of a sea. They don't feel that what's going to happen. They're going to get killed. So they said, what are you doing, Moshe? There are not enough graves in Egypt that we should be buried there. You're going to bring us out here, that we should get killed here. So Moshe says to the people, don't be afraid. Stand up and watch Hashem will save you. Now Hashem will do battle for you. So then it says, Hashem says, to Moshe, what are you praying to me for? I told you I'd take care of you. Go into the water. I'll take care of you. So he tells the people, right, he lifts up his staff, and out they go into the water. And it says, the angel of God who had been in front of the children of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar went in front of them, and into the water they went, and the water split. Right now, that splits, the Jewish people go in. As the Jewish people are leaving, the water starts closing. Now, not closing where they are yet, because that's at the other end. Where it closes is where the Egyptians have gone in. And now the Egyptians are being killed. Up until now, God let the Egyptians live. So they should be able to tell the story of how God controlled them. But now they're too far gone. So he kills them. They go into the ocean, into the sea. God brings the water, kills them all. The Hebrews come out, they're not even wet. Right? Now, we're going to be reading in a few moments here what's called the Shir HaSayam, the Song of the Sea. It says that a spontaneous prophecy appeared to the Jewish people, and they all together in unison started to sing this song. And a song they never sang before. It's not like they knew the words. The words came to them prophetically. And they all sang this song. And this song is very, very insightful. in many ways. It begins in the bottom of 375. But a couple of things. We learn a lot from this song. We learn the simple understanding of what happened. We learn about how the Egyptians died, how different Egyptians died in different ways. But we also learn a number of things that have nothing to do directly with the splitting of the Red Sea. One of them is, there's an expression in here that when the Jewish people were crossing the sea, it says that they said, "This is my God, and I will honor him. I will beautify him." In other words, they say God splits the sea. That's my God. He split the sea to save us, and I will beautify God. My life will be dedicated to him. But Jewish law says that this has another meaning, which is that there's a mitzvah to have beautiful things, to make mitzvahs beautiful. Right? The fact that we have a beautiful Torah cover, we have a beautiful synagogue, about it. Nevertheless, you're supposed to do it. Right? Why? Because it says here, "This is my God, and I will beautify him." It's a nice idea. Right? There's another idea that's found in here, and that is that it says that it says when it begins, "Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael." This is what the Jewish people and Moshe saying when they went through the sea. That's right here on the bottom of 374 and 375. Right? Then Moshe and the children of Israel chose to sing this song. Now, the English is written in the past tense. Then they did this. But the Hebrew is not. The original words, it's future tense. Az Yashir. Then they will sing, it says. Yashir is to sing, future tense. They're saying here, this is an allusion to the future that those who are no longer with us will eventually, right, they will eventually come back. That's what we call Tchias HaMesim, the reanimation of the dead. That there will be a time when even those people who passed away will come back. And that's why it says, then in the future the Jewish people will sing. They will sing this. Even those who are no longer living will come back and sing this. Right? So it's important that we know that part of the basic Jewish philosophy is that we know that there is such a thing as the revival of the dead or the reanimation of the dead. We know there is such a thing. It's a fundamental belief of Judaism. We also know that it's an important mitzvah for us to beautify all of our mitzvahs, to make things nice. Those are the two things we learn from this song. And those are important things, but like, why here? Why do you talk about the splitting of the Red Sea, and I got to learn about the reanimation of the dead? And why, when we're talking about the splitting of the Red Sea, do we have to say that you have to make mitzvahs beautiful? Tell it to me later. I mean, why now? Tell it to me yesterday. Tell it to me tomorrow. Why does God specifically wait until they sing this song to teach us this lesson? There's got to be some relationship between the song and the splitting of the sea, and there's two things. So one way of understanding this is as follows, that if you ever look in your Haggadah, and you look at the commentaries on your Haggadah, which talks about the splitting of the sea, one thing it says is that splitting the sea was not just splitting the sea. Right? It's a pretty big mitzvah that the Jews are standing there about to get killed. God splits the sea. They go into the sea. He doesn't close it till they get out. When the Egyptians go in, he closes it in order to kill them. Right? That's a pretty big deal, right? In and of itself, that he goes and does that. But the commentaries tell us that he did many mitzvahs. I mean, many things for us. He made it so that if you got thirsty, you could go over and touch the wall and get fresh water. Is that if you were hungry, that trees, God made it that trees had been growing there, so you could take a piece of fruit. But a second ago, there was just water there. Now God made a tree. It says that God made the ground solid, so you didn't have to walk through mud. But so you say, isn't it enough that God just went and saved us? He has to make it so that we don't have to walk in the mud. I understand, like, I go outside, and I want to come to shul, let's say, and it's muddy out. My shoes get all ruined, so I complain about it. But really, is that when God saves my life? Like, imagine some guy goes to Mr. X, he puts a gun to his head and says, "I'm going to kill you," and the guy shoots the gun and nothing happens. So you run away and your shoes get muddy, and you go and you complain that your shoes got muddy. Right? So that's what's happening here. God not only saves their life, but he makes it that their shoes don't get muddy. Right? Why? You're going to complain? Who cares if you complain about it? So the answer is God went way beyond what he had to do. He wanted to not only show that I'm saving your life, but I love you, and I want you to have not just your life, but more. It's not enough to just save your life. I want to save your life and be good about it. I want you to have a good relationship with me. I want you to have everything you need. Your shoes should be clean when you come through. You're hungry, you should have something to eat. You're thirsty, you have something to drink. It's not enough to just have you go through. What is that? That's exactly what we're talking about with our mitzvahs. If you want to tell me, it's enough, God says put on tefillin, I'll buy it on tefillin. I can buy a pair of tefillin for $400. But if I go out and buy a pair of tefillin for $1,500, right, they're much nicer tefillin. But I can still fulfill the mitzvah for $400. Nevertheless, I'm fulfilling it for $1,500. Why? Same reason that God made the ground solid, so that I didn't make my shoes dirty. Because I want to make the mitzvah special. I want to show how important they are to me. God wanted to show us how important we are to him. So he went and did those things for us. It's the same idea. And then, therefore, then why the revival of the dead? Why here talk about the revival of the dead? It says as follows. You imagine that Moshe says to the Jewish people, okay, guys, we came out of Egypt. Let's sing a song. Let's sing. They'd say, what are you, crazy? We just, 80% of us didn't leave Egypt. Everybody had somebody that they knew or that was in their family that didn't leave. They got killed. Right? I'm not in the mood to be singing songs. Yeah, okay, God saved my life. But my brother's gone, my sister, my cousin, whatever it is, they're not here anymore. Only 20% of us are still here. Right? I'm not in the mood to sing a song. But nevertheless, Moshe says, don't you understand? It says in the beginning, Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael. It doesn't say that Moshe and the Jewish people sang the song. It says they will sing the song. So who will sing the song? The people who died. They're coming back. The time will come when you'll see your relatives again. They'll be back. All your loved ones will be back. So then they said, oh, they're going to be back. Now we have reason to sing. Right? We didn't lose all those people. They're going to come back. So therefore, the whole idea of the revival of the dead, that those people who had died are coming back, is necessary to say right here. When I asked you, why would they say it here? That's why. So that those people should know it. They tell a story with the Bubba of a Rebbe. The Bubba of a Rebbe went through the Holocaust. And all of the people that he knew went through the Holocaust. And they were broken people. They were really broken. And he moves to New York and he opens up then a very small and a very simple Hasidic group and a palace, so to speak, or a place where they meet. Now it's a big thing, but then it was very small. And he says to them on the first Shabbos, let's sing some songs. And the people say to him, Rebbe, we're so grateful that we have you. My mother died, my sister died. I just came out of the war. They killed us. I was in Auschwitz. I saw what they did to us. How can I be happy and sing songs? So he says, because one day they're going to come back. Those people who were killed, they're going to come back. You're going to be with them again. So they understood. So there's a reason to sing. It's the same thing as the message here. There's a reason to sing. And that's why it says what it does. There's also an important, in the oral law, in the oral tradition, it tells us that the splitting of the sea is not an easy thing. Right? Physically, imagine splitting of a sea is separating water from water. And water has no physical strength, right? Water can do things. The movement of water can do things, but water itself can't stand up. You can't make water stand up. So, right? So, and we see here that God split it. He made it stand up. That's what he did when he split it. So it says that the making of marriages, right, of couples, is harder than splitting the sea. And most people understand this statement as meaning that it's hard to make a shidduch, to find a young man and a young woman and that fall for each other, that are good for each other, and they marry each other and have a good marriage. That's a hard thing. They say that's very, very difficult. And it compares it to the amount of effort to splitting the sea. To take water, which just goes to the lowest point, it can't hold itself in a wall, and make it into a wall. That's so hard. That's what it's like to make a shidduch between a man and a woman. But one of my teachers told me that's not what it means. What it really means is, it's not making the marriage that's hard. It's keeping the marriage that's hard. It's making the marriage work that's hard. You want to make the marriage work. That's like splitting the sea. That's like taking something that has no substance and giving it substance. That's like taking water and make it stand up. That's hard. And here the Torah is telling us a message. Marriage is an important part of our life. However, you have to realize that marriage, it's not simple. You don't just marry someone and you struggle for a year, 2 years, and then either you get a divorce or everything's fine. You struggle for a year or 2 years, and you get a divorce if you gave up at that point. Sometimes you need to. But otherwise, you stay married, and you keep struggling. Year after year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you keep struggling. Why? Because you want it to work. And a man and woman are very different. And you have to do whatever you can to try to make it work. That's why it says that splitting the Red Sea is harder than making a relationship between a husband and a wife. That's a hard thing to do. And I tell people all the time when I do marriage counseling that you can't think that after 20 years of marriage that you've been married so long you'll be married forever. If you don't constantly work at your marriage, you'll be like two ships passing in different directions in the night. There'll be a moment when you have a connection. After that, you get further and further away from each other, and you'll have no marriage anymore. Marriage requires constant and consistent work and effort. Just like God making the sea split had to be constant effort, because if there was a moment that God didn't have in mind that the sea should split, the sea would go back to the way it was, the normal way, which is just one big body of water. So too we have to realize the same thing when it comes to our marriages. And then we go on with this song, and it has all types of descriptions. And if you look at it, you'll see, for instance, on 277 it says, Pharaoh's chariots and army he threw in the sea, and the pick of his officers were mired in the sea of reeds. Deep water covered them. They descended in the darkness like stone. Your right hand, right, Hashem smashes. The enemy. You shatter your opponents. Blasphemy, your nostrils were heaped up straight against the wall. What it's telling you is a lot of description of what happens. For instance, sunk like a stone. You have one place that says that the enemies were like drowned like a reed. Another place it says they did like a stone. There's a difference between if you put a reed, like a straw, a natural straw, in water, or you put a stone in water, the reaction is very different. Well, a stone goes right to the bottom. Right? A reed floats around, and the waves come and knock it on. Eventually, the weed gets so waterlogged it goes to the bottom. So the Torah is telling us here that God treated each Egyptian differently. It wasn't like God said, okay, the Egyptians have to be punished for what they did. This one Egyptian has to be punished for what he did. This one did terrible things. This one just went along for the ride. This one tried to help, but he couldn't. This one was bad part of the time. This one was terrible. The ones who were terrible, they were like a straw, going up and down and up and down. They catch a breath, they go back down and drown again. They go back up again, they take a breath. They could go for a whole day before they drowned. The ones who were better among the Egyptians, they were like a stone. They went in and they sunk to the bottom and died right away. So they didn't suffer as much. The idea being is that God judged each one of them separately. He didn't just simply say, all the Egyptians are gone. Every person, right, has to realize that there's justice in the world, that ultimately God judges us with justice. And just because you were one of the bad guys, you might have been a bad guy who's not so bad. Right? You might have been a bad guy who's just a little bad. That's right, how you could be a bad guy who was horrible. And based on who you were judged and treated in that way. And that's why it says it in such a manner. Okay. We then get on 381, we see Miriam. Betikach Miriam Hanavia, and Miriam the prophet took Achos Aaron, she was a sister of Aaron, Esatof Biyada, she took a tambourine in her hand, V'teitzana kol hanashim, she gathered all the women behind her, V'tehufu milchomas, and they went out with their drums and they started dancing. And here we see that Miriam was a great prophet as well. Not just men are prophets. Women can be prophets also. And yet we still see a separation between men and women. You see, Miriam led the women, and Moshe and Aaron led the men. Of course, Moshe and Aaron also led everybody, but you see that she took the women specifically. So in Judaism, we have an idea that men and women are different. Men and women have a certain amount of separation, but a man is not better than a woman, and a woman is not better than a man. They're different. And therefore, each person is judged by who they are. If you're a woman who's righteous and does what you're supposed to do, or you're a man who's righteous and does what you're supposed to do, you'll be pretty much in the same place. Because a man and a woman have the same potential, just different ways of doing it. Right? This is an important point, because throughout Jewish history, Judaism has always been extremely advanced when it came to gender politics. Right? If you look back in society, back in the times of the Greeks and the Romans, they were buying and selling women as if they were cattle, no different than an animal. You could buy a woman, sell a woman, it made no difference. They had no rights, they had no civil rights, they had no human rights. A woman was basically a commodity, while the men who had more power, they were the ones with the rights. Like if you were in Greece, it talks about Greek citizens and slaves. First thing is, who was a Greek citizen? One rule was women were not citizens. Only a man could be a citizen. Women were treated as if they were below that. Right? You find it throughout history. Right? But you find that the Jewish people, on the other hand, when they were loyal to their beliefs, treated women with the same equality as men, but different. In other words, men and women have equal potential. Men and women have equal ability to be great, but men and women are different. And men, are often distracted by women. It's not women whose problem. It's like, we say that, there's a rule that says that men shouldn't listen to women singing. That's what it says. So does that mean a woman can't sing? Most people think that's what it means. Women shouldn't sing. It doesn't mean that. It means you can sing all you want. I can't listen to you. If you want to be nice to me, you're not going to sing in a place where I have to be. I have to be somewhere. So if you want to be nice to me, they'll do it. But is it your problem that I can't handle your singing? No, it's my problem. It's not your problem. Right? You had throughout history, right, that women were treated just better than animals, and they were illiterate. They weren't taught to read or write. I went to Italy a number of years ago, and I tell this story often, but we went to the Jewish Museum, which is in the basement of the Great Synagogue in Rome. And the woman who took us around showed us a lot of very interesting things, because the Roman Jewish community goes back to the days of the Second Temple, even before the temple was destroyed. There were Jews there. And she showed us how throughout history, Jews had basically two very common professions. Not the only ones, but the common ones. One was tailors and seamstresses, right? They made clothing, they made curtains, things like that. That was a very common one. The second one was they were like teachers. And the reason is because Jewish women were literate, they were educated. Non-Jewish women were not. And one thing that they showed us in the museum were letters that were written by one queen or princess and sent to another queen or princess. So you had the Queen of Holland would send a letter to the Queen of Spain. So they would have, because they had some copies of these letters. And the reason they had them was not to show us that they had letters from the Queen of Spain to the Queen of Holland or vice versa. It was to show us how they were written. And they were written by Jews. Because only Jewish women could associate with Jewish female royalty. Jewish men didn't. Men didn't in general. But the Jewish women were literate. They could read and write. So the princes and the princesses and the queen would hire Jewish women to write their letters because they couldn't write. They didn't know how. Even the queen didn't know how to read and write. So you hired Jewish women to do it. And the Jewish women would write to each other in different cities. But they would be writing from one queen to the other, but they'd be sending messages to each other because it was Jewish women on the other end reading it also. And you could actually see from the letters how they would communicate back and forth, right? That showed you how women were treated with respect by Judaism. And they're treated, and so here you see the same idea. Miriam separates the women from the men. She leads the women. But the women are as much prophets as the men. Just as the men have the ability to have a relationship with God and be close to God, so too the women did, just the same way. But she's the one who led them. And that's what it says here.
Rabbi, still the only thing, well, I'd say the only, but one thing is the Jewish divorce, the get. That a woman can remain a sota for the rest of her life. She can never remarry if he won't.
It's not a sota, it's an aguna, but I know what you mean. An aguna means a chained woman. A sota is a woman who has an affair.
Oh.
You mean an aguna. Guna means chained. Right, it's true.
Yeah.
And
can still remarry.
Right, but this is a Torah law, so it makes it it's hard for us to be able to deal with that. In other words, if you told me it was rabbinic law, so I'd say the rabbis are sexist. We have to do something about it. However, I did see one place where it gave a bit of a sort of understanding. It said that while divorce is in the hands of the man, marriage is in the hands of the woman. Because the man can offer to purchase the woman's right of marriage from her. We call that getting married. The woman has a right to marry whoever she wants to marry. Right? A man comes to her and says, "Will you marry me?" And she can choose yes or no. He can't cause the marriage. He can make an offer. She can say yes or no. So too, the woman can't cause the divorce. The man has to say yes or no. So there is a certain balance, but it's a serious problem. It wouldn't be a problem, by the way, if men acted correctly. If men followed the Torah, and there was something wrong going on in the marriage, right, they'd give their wife a get, and that's the end of it. The problem is that men have learned, women in some ways as well, in different ways, but men have learned that you can use it as a weapon. And therefore, sure, you want a divorce? I'll give you a divorce, but I want $250,000. I want a job. I want the kids. I want the house. And the woman has stuck. Because if the man is going to be abusive, if the man is going to use religion against her, there's not much we can do. Right? It's true. The main problem is that since we live in a foreign country, our court system doesn't have the ability to inflict any type of punishment on somebody. So if you have a man who's abusing divorce, let's say that they really should get divorced, and they get a civil divorce. Now the woman wants to get married, and the man says, "I'm not going to give you a get so you can get married unless you get me $1 million." It happened. It happened more than we like.
In South Africa, years ago, brought in the law that through the rabbis there and one of the members of parliament who was Jewish, this was still, I think, whenever it was, that before a couple get married, he has to agree that if the Jewish couple, that he will give her a Jewish divorce, that he cannot get a civil divorce without giving her
we have the same law in Ontario, but there are problems with it. First is, according to the Torah, you can't force a man to give a get, even if he's getting divorced. Literally, if he's getting divorced, and he's saying, "I'll only give you a get if you give me the children in the house."
Yeah.
They can't go to the man and put a gun to his head and say, "Divorce your wife." They can't, because as soon as you force him, he's no longer willfully doing it. It's no good. Mm-hmm. So it raises problems, all of these things. But what you're seeing are attempts by the rabbis to deal with the fact that many men are abusive, and they're not acting correctly. If they acted correctly, then the fact that men have control over the get would not be an issue. No. It's only an issue because the men are acting incorrectly, and the rabbis have done many things to try to fix it. But it is an issue. But do we say that means then that Judaism looks at women as chattel, as things you can buy and sell? No, it doesn't. Judaism definitely doesn't. The rabbinic leadership don't. But it's not to say you don't have men who do it. They do. And you have that, and your example's right. But it's sad. But here we see Miriam. So it says, if you go into the next paragraph, it says, Moses caused Israel to journey from the Sea of Reeds, and they went to the wilderness of Shur. They went for a 3-day period in the wilderness, but they didn't find water. Then they came to Marah, but they could not drink the waters of Marah because they were bitter. Therefore, they called it Marah. It's a funny thing, right? They go to a city called Marah, which means bitter, and they went to drink water. They had an oasis, so they went to drink water. The water was bitter, so they called it Marah. Well, it's already called Marah, right? We already know that. So what does that mean? Technically is the people complained against Moshe, and they said, "Listen, Moshe, you took us out of Egypt. Now you take us in the desert. We're going to die out here. Give us water. What are we going to drink?" So Moshe cries out to God, and Hashem shows him a tree. Moshe throws the tree into the water, and the water becomes sweet. And therefore, right, we see that he accomplishes it. Now, what is this weird story? Like, what is it trying to tell us? They went to drink water. The water was bitter. They couldn't drink the water. So they complained to Moshe. Moshe goes to God. God says, they take this tree, throw it in the water, and it's fine. Why don't you just make it fine? What do you got to play this whole game for? So the answer is right in the words of the Torah. It says, in Hebrew, it says, Vayavo Marasa. They arrived at the city of Mara. V'lo yachol lishtos mayim. They weren't able to drink water, right? Mimara, because it was bitter. Then it says ki marim heim. Right? Simply, it means the water was bitter. But if you read it in the Hebrew, it also means they were bitter. You know why the water was bitter? Because they were bitter. Bitter people are never happy, no matter what. You get people, no matter what kind of business you're in. You can own a restaurant, you can own a store, you can have a shul. If you have someone coming in who's bitter, who's upset, who's in a bad mood, you can't make them happy. There's nothing you can do. You can try. You're obligated to try, to be reasonable. But ki marimim, the water was bitter because they were bitter. So what is Moshe told to do? Take a tree and throw this tree into the water and it'll become sweet. What's that got to do with this whole thing I just told you? How does that help? A tree, right, is a symbol of life for us. Trees grow, right? They blossom. We have family trees. We have trees symbolize many things like that. And that was the idea, that God tells them you should throw this tree, this symbol of life, into the water. It'll make the water sweet. Let's take a look at it in light of where we are in the year, right? This Shabbos, when we read this Parsha, is Tu B'Shvat. What is Tu B'Shvat? The 15th day of the month of Shvat. And it means that in Israel, spring begins. It's the beginning of spring. But even in Israel, you look around, it doesn't look like spring. Maybe it's 15 degrees in Jerusalem, 17 degrees in Jerusalem, while it's -3 here. But it still doesn't look like spring. So the commentaries tell us that what it means is that the juice within the trees is starting to flow. It's like I grew up, where I grew up is where most of the maple syrup is made. People think it comes from Vermont. It really doesn't. For the most part, maple syrup comes from upstate New York, and it's shipped to Vermont, where it's bottled, right? In order so they can say Vermont maple syrup, but it's not from Vermont. There is some, but most comes from upstate New York. It's a much larger area. And that's where I grew up. And right around Tu B'Shvat, right around now, you go out and you'll see that the men have knocked holes in the maple trees with little spouts and little buckets, and it's starting to flow right now. Right now, the sap is starting to flow, right? It doesn't, you'd say, everything looks dead. It's the middle of February. There's no grass on the ground. There's no plants, right? Nobody wants to go outside. It's freezing outside. Everything seems dead. But underneath it all, there is something. Inside those trees, there's still life. It's starting to come back. It's starting to rejuvenate. That's what the message is here. That's why he threw the tree in. And that's why it's so appropriate on Tu B'Shvat. Because the lesson that we learn is that no matter how bad everything seems to be for us, how difficult things are, I'm having trouble with my kids, I'm having trouble with my marriage, I'm having trouble making a living, I'm having trouble with all of these things, you put it together in the end, right? There's always a future. God will make things better. It will get better. If you will become bitter, you might stay bitter. You might stay that way. Yeah. But if you realize that underneath it all, the sap is flowing, it's starting to change. Things are getting better already, even though you don't see it. We go back to the beginning of what we said. Kikar of who? Because God's our relative. We don't always understand what he does and why he does it, but he's doing it for that reason. He's teaching us that don't be bitter, because I'll make it better. So it says here, the Jewish people couldn't drink the water because they were bitter. So Moshe goes and shows them, hey, I know you went through, they know that. They know that, then they'll become sweet. And when the Jewish people become sweet, the water becomes sweet. Then they can drink it. That's really the ultimate message of what they're saying as it concludes the whole section of the Parsha. After that, the Parsha just goes on with the description pretty much of them going on, right, to the next place. There's more. They're still complaining to Moshe that they don't have the right food, they don't have meat, they don't have all these things, and they're pretty much similar. And this is also where you hear about the mun, right? The Jewish people don't have enough food. So God gives them manna from heaven, right, which is also an amazing thing, because manna from heaven is bread that comes from heaven, but the bread had supernatural abilities. First thing is there was no waste. All the problems that we have in our bodies from going through a waste process, they didn't have that. You ate a piece of bun, and it was totally absorbed into your body. There was no waste. Secondly is it tasted whatever like you wanted it to taste like. Whatever you wanted. You wanted it to taste like cheese, it tastes like cheese. You want it to taste like duck, it tastes like duck. Whatever you wanted, that's what it tasted like. And that's what God gave to us. But I heard a famous question in the name of different rabbis, but the question was good and the answer was good. And the question was, mun tastes like whatever you want it to taste like. What if you don't have any thought? Well, you don't think about it at all. What if you just eat it without any thoughts? What does it taste like? Nothing is the answer. It tastes like nothing. If that's who you are, if you don't put any thought into your life, into what you do and who you are, that's what your life is nothing. You get nothing out of it, you become nothing, you do nothing, you change nothing. That's all it is. But if you dream, and you want to have things better, and you work towards that dream, you make that mun taste like chicken, it tastes like chicken. You want it to taste like steak, it tastes like steak. But you don't want to think about it, you're just going to be blah and bitter, then it's nothing. That's what it'll be. And that's really how the Parsha closes, with that message. It's the message from the beginning till the end of the Parsha. The idea that we have an obligation to try to see the better part of everything that happens to us, because ultimately everything God does for us is good, ki karovu, because He's our relative. He wants it to be good. It might not look good, it might not taste good, but it's often not because of God, it's because of us. We need to have the right outlook and the right frame of mind, and when we do that, then we can see God's hand in making life so much better for us. And that's really the message of what the whole Parsha tells us, right from beginning to end. Right? And I mean, there's a few other things, but that's really it. So I think we'll conclude with that. And just remind, we're a bit over. So remind you that this weekend we're having, it's the Yortzeit of Rabbi Weinberg, right, who founded Aish Torah, who we have so much that we owe to him. And then we're going to have all of our classes are going to deal with him, and we're going to speak a bit about him, about some of the Torah that he said, some of the philosophy that he said, who he was. So it's a good week to come and to be able to sort of show some gratitude to a person who really cared about everybody and made a difference in the world. Mm-hmm.
And there's also a Seder on Shabbos.
Yeah, we have the Tu B'Shvat Seder, right.
Saturday evening.